So usually at this time, after we've said a quick hello, we take a moment, and it's an important moment for all of those of you, and there are many of you in here this morning, thank you, who are based in Canada. You'll understand the importance of this and why we spend time every Friday that we get together. And it's just to acknowledge and recognize where we are and the land that we're meeting on. And it doesn't matter to us whether we're virtual or face-to-face. So Craig and I are based in Calgary. The picture that hopefully you can see on your screen is SAIT's main campus up on the hill looking down on downtown. This building is called Heritage Hall. And I have a feeling, I wasn't there yesterday, but I have a feeling it probably looked like this yesterday. And as Craig said, today we're expecting 11 above, so it won't look like that today. But that building stands on traditional territories, and those are the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. Today, that encompasses our Indigenous people of the Treaty 7 region, the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda, and the Northwest Métis homeland. SAIT acknowledges all of the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. So today, wherever you are, especially if you're based in Canada, take a moment, put both feet firmly on the ground, and maybe just lean in a little bit to the heritage of where we've come from and where we're heading to. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenny. And as Jenny mentioned, please do carry on the chat in the chat. And if you do have a specific question as we proceed here, please try and put it into the Q&A. And as a reminder, this recording will come out afterwards, but it will also come out as a podcast. So everything that we're doing now is being captured in podcast format, and will get shared that way as well. And so I've just popped into the link or into the notes here where you will be able to access that. But Jenny, we I have to chuckle because we usually set these topics a few weeks in advance, and we came up with a fancy title for today about propelling your team to success. And I remember we were starting to prepare for this one, and we were like, what the heck did we really want to try and talk about in this one? The title sounded great, but what is it we wanted to talk about? And I think where we got to on this is, folks, how do you, as a leader, your job is to help your team succeed. Your job is to help your team get their job done and to help your team get better at doing their job. And you can do that by either getting in the weeds all the time and doing it with them, or you can get out of the way. How do you do that? So Jenny, I think maybe that's where we really wanted to go here is, as a leader, how do you know when to get out of your team's way and let them excel and run? And how do you know when you need to jump in and kind of get into things a little bit more, if that makes sense?
That's a good question. That's a really good question to get us started. So all behavior change starts with self-awareness. And I think that's the hardest part of all of this, all the Friday conversations that we have. We want a prescription. How do we do this? Oh, just follow A, B, C. Like, give me a nice little checklist. And this is one of those areas where we're really relying on that self-awareness part first. And the difficulty with self-awareness always, I think it was Tasha Ulrich that did this study. So the way that it works is, if we were to ask everybody on here, okay, are you self-aware? About 86% of us would say yes, I am. And the striking truth of it is that 12% of us are. And the part that makes me chuckle, and I say this in the classroom all the time, is now we're all sitting there thinking, yes, we're part of that 12%. So that self-awareness is difficult. And so what we're really looking for are cues that can help us to hold that awareness. So, for example, where will we go to? Our easiest one, we talk about this a lot, meetings. Okay, you're in a meeting, your cue is, if you're doing all the talking, you're in the way. If you're setting the agenda every week, you're in the way. If people are vying for time on your agenda, you're really in the way. And so it's the smallest things that begin to make the bigger changes.
Okay. So I want to back up because I know you don't do numbers or anything sensible like that, you say, but you started right off the bat here with some numbers. of 86% and 12%. Can you just help us understand how we are defining self-awareness in this case?
Ooh, now by
Right.
her standards, no, I can't remember the study that closely.
Okay.
And
That's fine. But how would you define it then?
Oh, this is a tricky Friday. It's hard to put words around it. It's understanding who you are and how you show up, and being able to pay attention to the cues in front of you. And the cues in front of you, like people say as a leader, oh, I don't get any feedback. We get feedback all the time. There is feedback everywhere. And that feedback comes in body language, that feedback comes in actions, that feedback comes in questions, that feedback comes in contributions. We dig right into it. We were talking about this 2 weeks ago. That feedback comes in the results and how people perform to get the results. So we have feedback everywhere. And when you're seeing that, it's simply being able to stop and say, well, actually, what was my contribution to this? And so when I get called all the time by my dear family on my tone of voice, apparently I have a teacher tone of voice, can't imagine. And I don't know that you know, they're like, don't use your teacher voice on me. I did not. Oh yes, you did. And that's a chorus of 3 voices. Okay, game over, Jenny. You used your teacher voice, pick up the cue there and do something about that. And is there anything that can help me to recognize that as I move through? So it wasn't very succinct, but I think that's where I'm leaning in.
No, it makes sense. And it's an interesting, I think it can be an interesting rabbit hole for a leader too, especially if you really take the time to think about it, and perhaps you get into this spinning of, okay, am I really hearing or seeing what I think I'm hearing and seeing, and how does that reflect on me? And should I, right? You can overthink too much. So in my mind, I think there's a real piece around self-confidence that is also tied with self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Like your level of confidence as a leader, I think, can help you, or in some cases hinder you, right? If you're so confident to the point of just turning on the blinders and not paying attention to those cues. But I think where you get into that sweet spot sometimes, we've talked about this before, is when you get into the flow of work, right? Things are going well on the team is clicking, folks are talking, folks are engaging, you're building that culture that you want, the results that your team is required to generate. You know, you're either hitting those results or you're blowing them out of the water. Everything's good, right? Then you hit a hiccup, you hit a road bump. And that, I think, is sometimes where leaders can perhaps get derailed a little bit if they don't really stop and focus on the fact that what they've done already has gotten them to a good point. You know, this is a moment that too shall pass. But what's your thought? How does the confidence and results and all of that kind of tie together in this self-awareness piece? And then how does it lead to helping your team?
And there's a couple of things there too. Like, it's all very well if you're in the flow, and remember, our job is to help others find their flow as well. And so your flow isn't their flow. So there's an awareness within there as well. Like, what does that look like? What is that? How does that work for each individual who's on your team? And each individual will have a different way. So it's kind of fascinating that we're heading to this result, which is never an end destination. Like, we're on a journey and we're all going to get there differently. And then in your other sort of phrase within there, the confidence part, if I have, and we did talk about this the other week, you know, if my confidence is solid, I've got to be really careful that I'm not putting someone else down. And I've also got to be super careful with the, you know, be like me. We don't need more of me. We need you, and we need everything that you bring to the role. And then when we hit that moment, coming back to the self-awareness part, we have different personas is a word that's often put towards them. So the Jenny that you see every day when everything is good presents one way. The overextended version, or stress or anxiety, whatever, that's different. And all of a sudden, all these wonderful strengths that we talk about can become things that hinder us in that place too. And so as a leader, it's another part for that self-awareness. Who are you and how do you show up when you're being held to account, when you're under fire, perhaps from somewhere else, or under pressure from somewhere else? What does that switch into? Because that ever so supportive, aware, paying attention can really quickly turn into a micromanager, or somebody who is there offering reinforcement continuously, can become a nitpicker within there. And so that's where that self-awareness is. We're not stable. We're humans. We're dynamic. And that's part of the tapestry that makes it harder, I think.
Yeah. Do you think leaders are under kind of unfair pressure to always have the right presenting self forward to their team? What you were just saying there kind of triggered me a little bit in terms of maybe triggers too hard a word, but it made me think that as a leader, you are constantly needing to think about how you are presenting to your team, perhaps. And does that sometimes get in the way? Right? Like everybody's allowed to have a bad day, but are leaders allowed to have not allowed to have as many bad days as their team?
And don't ask me to define it, but it depends how we define a bad day. So we're moving with moments and days. But the thing I think that you caught there is this idea of awareness. And I think some leaders make it much, much harder on themselves. And so I'm using a little bit of Brené Brown speak, but if you are pleasing people, trying to prove yourself, or being perfect, that's really, really tough. And you're setting a bar so high, it's expensive, and it's expensive on your energy, and it's expensive on the people around you. And it also never allows you to show up as you. And so, we talk all the time when, about destigmatizing failure. That's kind of the tagline. And nobody on a team is going to talk about where they got it wrong if their leader's perfect. And so the ramifications of that actually end up being one of those things that hinder your team. Just as we're talking about, your team can't sort of lean into all of the things that went wrong, the mistakes, the errors, the small stuff that we could all learn from, and therefore all be better, and therefore all perform better, if our leader's so busy being perfect that we never get to have that conversation. And so, can you have a bad day? Yes. The question is, what do you do when you've had a bad day? And so, maybe your frustration shines through, okay? And everybody feels that. What do you do next is the important thing, I think. And that's an emotional intelligence. You're either aware, we call it an emotional wake. It's what do you leave behind you? And this is where it gets really important, because if you get frustrated, perhaps display that, there's an expression of emotion there. Well, that's actually good, because if I know you're frustrated, now I know what I'm working with. My intention when I get up in the morning isn't, I'm going to frustrate Craig today and see how much I can annoy him. Honestly, it's not ever. And so, but if I don't know you're frustrated, well, it's just information. No, okay, whatever. But if I know you're frustrated, that's where the connection is.
Yeah.
But the key is going back to the emotional wake. If you just leave with that, let's say it wasn't very well expressed, and I am put down or shamed or blamed or judged or whatever those things might be, the impact of that is so much longer than we would ever imagine. We think, oh, pick yourself up and get on with it. But there's study upon study that shows that performance goes down after that. And it doesn't just go down for a couple of hours, it goes down for days. And so I think that's where it becomes really important is, okay, you saw my frustration, this is important to me, or whatever that might be. And what are we going to do next? Or what is your request? Or what is that part? So it's the yes, be you. And what are you going to do next? And I think that's where the accountability lies. And also what we're doing in there is we're role modeling. And that's really, really important to any team.
Yeah. And I think in that situation, what you as a leader should do is what you would expect anybody on your team or anybody else in your organization to do. Just admit it. Hey, sorry, having a bad day, right? My bad. It's not you, it's on me, right? But I think the importance or the piece that leaders do need to remember is that what you were just touching on there is the amount of emotional bandwidth your leader, or as a leader, you can take up in your team's head, right? Your actions, your words, your lack of reaction, your body language carries a lot more weight than it does perhaps on anybody in the team. And so I think that, you've been put in a position of leadership for a reason, to your point, Jenny, because you are who you are, and there's no reason that you shouldn't still be yourself, but you do have to remember that you carry a lot of bandwidth in your team's minds.
There's a fantastic YouTube clip. We can stick it in the resources that go out. And John Amici talks about the impact of leaders. We use it in Leading Beyond all the time. And he basically says, if you whisper, you're shouting. If you tiptoe, I think maybe he says, you're stomping through. Like, your impact as a leader is incredible. And there's the self-awareness. We don't know that. We're not really aware of how much that happens. I remember a CEO in conversation, we had an audience from their workplace, and he said, I've stopped thinking out loud, because if he mutters something, oh, I wonder if, someone will go spend weeks or months on that, bringing it back. And it was just I wonder if. And so that impact is crucial. That hits your team, and that can hold your team. And sometimes in great places, there's some brilliant numbers out there, and I'd have to dig to know where exactly I got them. I think it might be John Gottman's work, but for the highest performing teams, we're looking at, I think it was 5.6 actually, positive reinforcement to every negative reinforcement. 5 to 1, really. And I think an average performing team was 3 to 1, and the worst performing teams actually went into negatives. It was three negatives to 1 positive. But when you think about how you move through your day, that's incredible. They don't all have to be spoken, I don't believe. I think body language has a lot to do with it too.
Yeah, well, and think about that too from the perspective of folks who may be running remote teams, right? That 5.6 to 1. Sorry, was that per day? Did you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, actually, no, not per day. That's
okay.
That's like their average. So if you take it over an amount of time, not per day. Thank you.
Okay, no, that makes sense. But still, it does reinforce, the importance of focusing on the positive, focusing on strengths. That's something that we've talked about here before, and I think maybe we can dive into a little bit more. Is Marcus Buckingham's comments around being able to do what you love at work, right? But I think what we've kind of touched on here is can you help, again, getting back to how do you get out of the way and when do you intervene, right? And I've heard this expressed before as, are you playing as a leader? Are you playing the hero on your team, or are you playing the hero maker? Right. Which I love that expression. And so I guess where we could probably go on this one now, Jenny, is what does a leader need to do to be that hero maker more often than not? What are the things that you can focus on? What should you be focusing on?
I think I would look at control. Like, how much do you need to be in control? I think that's a really good sort of place to start. And it's moving slightly away from your analogy, but I think it's the same thing when we look at it. Aaron Digman's analogy is with traffic lights and roundabouts. And so for those of you who look at the resources, there's a slide in our deck for this. But if you think about the traffic light, okay, and in the US, there's, I don't know, well over 300,000 sets of traffic lights. It's all about control. The person who controls the traffic lights tells you when to stop, tells you when to go. It's compliance. And if we all behave, we will get through and we will be safe. The alternative is the roundabout. And the roundabout, there's, I don't know, like significantly less, far less of them. And the roundabout requires what we call social coordination. I have to pay attention to what other people are doing, and our aim is to get everybody through. And if you look on it from above, it's a little bit less organized and compliant than the traffic light, but we're getting traffic through and we're giving way and we're working together to make sure that that works. Statistically, this is a little scary. Roundabouts are far safer than traffic lights. And the throughput is greater from a roundabout. So if we take that to a leader's point, how much control are you holding? How much autonomy are you taking away? And I think that's a really good self-awareness place to start, because if your entire day is spent approving, looking over somebody's back, rereading, double check, like whatever it might be, you're in that traffic light situation. You are 100% in control. And if control of your people is what you're looking for, well done. But when you're in that roundabout part, you're holding them. And remember, we have adults who come to work to do a job that they're skilled. Theoretically, we hired them and they're working together. You can lean into, possibilities that go way beyond that control piece. So when you look at your control, what are you trading off? If I give, like Henry Stewart says, what can you pre-approve today? Where can you give people space to go? Give them that autonomy to go. And the beauty of that, back to what you said a few moments ago, is if I do that, suddenly I get some time back in my day. And if you get time back in your day, wouldn't that be cool if you could go back to doing more of what you love to do rather than parenting people at work or controlling people at work? And so it's constant trade and tension, and it depends on, your context and your people, etc. But I think we still get caught in that holding too much control. We see leadership as a power and a control dynamic. And there's always going to be an element of that. And we can actually move that a lot, I think.
Yeah, I love that pre-approval. And I'm sorry, I can't help but chuckle and think about Chevy Chase and Chris are in European vacation, saying, "Look, kids, Big Ben. Look, kids, Big Ben. Look, kids, Big Ben." As he's going around the roundabout. So you also don't want your team sitting there and spinning either. You do have to be able to help them get out of the roundabout. But this piece around being able to do what you love, and I think we've talked about this before. A question that you've encouraged us to ask, or maybe it's comes from Buckingham or not, but is going to your team and like asking them, what's stopping you from doing your best work?
Yeah. That's Aaron Digman too, and it is a brilliant question. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Like, what is stopping you from doing the best work?
Yeah, and be prepared to act on that answer as a leader, right?
Yeah, and you know what? Surprisingly, and here's another key piece for leaders, goes back to the confidence bit that you were talking about. We will, if you're contemplating asking your team that question, very quickly in your head, you're going to build a story of what their answer will be. And we do it all the time. It's really unhelpful thinking because we can't read minds. We don't know. And we build this up. I'm like, oh God, I'm not answering that question. I can't move this. I can't do that. And actually, what a wonderful question to have, and what a conversation to have, because to your point, what can you act on within there? And by all accounts, the most popular answer still is, I attend too many meetings. Like that's it. And at that point, totally we can do something about that.
Absolutely. And I guess, I'd rather hear that than my team members say you is the answer to that question. But in all seriousness, I would imagine there are probably leaders out there who would be afraid to ask that question.
Yes. For
that potential answer.
And so if that is the answer, right, there's the feedback that you've been looking for. There's the feedback we hear all the time. I don't get any feedback. Okay, there it is, you. And so in your preparation, well, what are you going to do with that answer? And so lean in, like, what do we call it? Situational humility. Okay, yes, it's me. Okay, can you tell me more? For me, my job is to help you do your best work. Your answer is me. I'm not leaving today. I'm not resigning. And we're going to do this together. so what do you need from me to help you to do your best work? And then here's the difficult part, because if you hear the answer your cortisol is going to go up. Like, that's pretty stressful. So you have to listen. You have to listen to the answer and listen really carefully. And really, here's your 5 to 1. Recognize and applaud the person who will dig in and give you a real answer, because that's role modeling at its best. Psychological safety, you're somebody who says you, and I hope it doesn't happen, like everybody who's listening, but that person just steps 100% into courage to help you all get better. We
Absolutely.
have to celebrate that. And all too often, because it's embarrassing, it's a little bit like, oh, and we forget. And really what we want to do is thank you for answering that. Now let's dig in. What do you need from me to help us, or whatever that might be?
Yeah, in theory, to your point, if somebody does step up and give you that answer, I suppose there's one of two things that's going on there. One, they feel safe enough to engage you in that conversation, and let's assume that's 99% of it. And good on you, because you've started probably what's going to be, or what should be, a fairly powerful conversation and connection. On the other hand, I suppose there could be the 1% that goes, I got nothing left to lose here, so I'm just going to try and encourage the package, per se. But I think the key thing for me there is you have to be able to lean into it, right? And sorry, Lynn, that question was, asking your team, what's stopping you from doing your best work?
Yeah.
And that, there's actually maybe potentially, Jenny, a mixture there in terms of, is this a question asked of a team? And how does that differ perhaps from asking it from individuals one-on-one? I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this now. Maybe I'm stuck in the roundabout of this question.
I'm not going to get away with that now, am I? So it really depends on you and your team. I think if you're going to ask it to a team, I'd really encourage almost that sort of turn and learn version. And so in your meeting, you do this virtually, or you can do it face to face, but have everybody have a post-it note, or if they still bring books to your meeting, whatever that looks like, just write down right now, what is stopping, and you could even go team level, what is stopping us from doing our best work? And then in your one-on-one, what is stopping you from doing your best work? And I also think this is really important to ask yourself the same question. And there's the awareness and the reflection. That's probably where this work starts, is ask yourself. And you're not going to come to I'm going to use the word right, it might not be fair, the right answer straight away. And here's your hero maker, or hero, I forget the other part that you put to it, because we will go to the easiest answer first. And so then the next question is actually, what's the real challenge hiding under here? Those of you who've seen Michael Bunge's Stainer's Advice Monsters will recognize that. What's the real challenge? And so you've got to stay with that for a little bit to actually get down to the real thing that's stopping you. And so, for example, it's meetings. Okay, well, what's actually the problem with the meetings? Because not all meetings are a waste of time. Some of them are fantastic. They actually achieve what they set out to achieve. So we've got to dig down a little bit further.
Yeah. So question that has come forward here is, how do you handle it when someone tells you what's stopping them from doing their best work, and it's not something you can change or influence? Organizational policy, budget.
I think it's a good conversation. And, when we're looking at that with somebody who's sat in front of us, who's frustrated with it, we're back to the conversation of control the controllables. And so energy put to something that we have no control over is a waste of energy. And so what we want to do is harness that energy and come back to control the controllables. Okay, I can't change the policy, or I don't even have influence on that. here's what we do have. And maybe it's redirection, maybe it's support, maybe they need to understand the bigger picture to know why that policy is in place. If there's a fence up, somebody put that fence up for a reason. What was the reason that put that in there? And if we keep having that conversation and there's no reason for the fence, well, now we're elevating that conversation. Where can you have the influence but always control the controllables? That's the best use of attention, focus, and energy.
Yeah, and I think as a leader too, you have to, depending on the situation, I think maybe you need to have the courage sometime to be able to go and challenge policy or challenge whatever the issue may be, especially if you're hearing it frequently enough, and you have the data or the evidence to say that this policy is hindering something here. There's ways of doing this, but as a leader, you need to be able to try and take some of that forward. If you've got one person complaining about one policy, and it's not really impacting things, you do have to make a decision at some point. Which things, what hills are you willing to die on? Absolutely. I guess is where I'm going there, right? No, go ahead.
I'd encourage and I 100% agree with that, but it encourages the conversation goes up. Remember, we always want to speak in terms of where that next level holds importance or where they're judged by. So I arrive with my frustration because I can't do my work because of this policy. It means nothing to you, right? You don't have my perspective, you don't do my work. And if you're a great leader, you'll be listening and you'll catch that frustration or that passion. But if I really want to catch your attention, I'm going to have speaking numbers when I'm talking to you. Okay, this is going to affect our numbers. This is driving it. And now you care. Now that will elevate. But to your point, what is the, let's call it evidence? Like what are we collecting before we take that influence? If it's just one person getting there wound up in that part, okay, let's come back to control the controllables.
Exactly. Right. And as a leader, another analogy I've often used is you've got, your role is to be either a shock absorber or an amplifier, right? And that goes both directions. So you can decide what you amplify up. You can also decide what you absorb on behalf of your team, right? And the same way, going back down, you can decide what messages really get funneled back down and which ones that you do need to amplify downward as well. Because we've all been in meetings with our leaders and, perhaps to your point, Jenny, they're thinking out loud and, that could be something that you would amplify, but maybe it's not the best decision, right? So I think you always have to be thinking about that. It goes back to the amount of bandwidth that you take up in your people's minds and how everything that you do is somewhat magnified and amplified.
And let's go back to what we were just saying earlier, though. Always amplify the good. Always. So that reinforcement, that 5 to 1, somebody's great idea, somebody's excellent contribution, somebody's great feedback from who's their customer facing, always amplify that.
Absolutely. So we've talked a little bit here too. This really kind of gets into the relationship that you have with your team members, right? And so I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit. The quality of the relationships that you have with each of your team members. How does that play into this as well?
I think we're doing, I always want to say, I think we're doing great work. And then, I'll say this and next week I'll be hit with 101 examples of where we've still got so much to do. But work for a while was very transactional. And I also think the pandemic didn't help us. And I think we're seeing the evidence of that now. Like we talk about amplify the good. We talk about the reinforcement ratios 5 to 1. And what I am noticing is there's a lot less, I talked about this the other week, there's a lot less high fives going on. There's a lot less, just genuine reinforcement. And it should be really clear here, nobody's saying that you praise somebody for doing their day job. We're not talking about that. And so how do we build those relationships? And, we get a lot of people saying, well, it's just fluff. They just come to work to do their job. Well, yes, and the deeper your relationship with that person, and you don't have to be their bestie, you don't have to be their best friend, but the better that you know that person, the more great work you and they will be able to provide. And we can do it in ways that actually help us. So one of the things that we always talk about a lot is social capital, and the Swedish term for it, fika, which is just so much more fun to say than social capital. But what if before a meeting, you actually check in or you connect? And you can do that on so many levels. Like we can do that on a really easy level where it's just a question and everybody answers the question, right? But that question, if it's well picked, and this is consistent and continuous, we're talking every time you have a team meeting, by answering that question, a couple of things happen. Number one, I get to know the people around the table just a little bit better. And as that happens each week, there are different connections that are made. This isn't just about the leader knowing their team. This is about the team knowing each other as well. We have to shift from co-workers to colleagues in order to build these relationships. But the other thing that happens is if you do that check-in, everybody around the table speaks. And so simply by taking those few moments to check in, one, you're building relationships, two, you're building understanding, and three, you just primed the room for everybody to speak, which really shifts how we show up and the contributions and what's happening there too.
Yeah, that's so good. And actually ties into a question that we have here is that if your leader is the one that calls meetings and won't stop talking, what do you do? I know we're going to get into meetings in a month or so, but
we're managing up again, and managing up is always really difficult. So a couple of things is to look at the agenda and how the agenda is how it's put together. So if the agenda is all the leaders, okay, I'm circling. Really, I think the thing is, can you have the conversation? And that's going to depend on your psychological safety, and it's a call in, not a call out. And so in your one-on-one, it may be a question that you ask. I have noticed that we spend an hour together once a week, and in that room, the value of us all sitting in that room is, what's the value of your hour's salary, roughly? And we're not entering into discussion, hearing great ideas.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way. The other way is give us a call.
Yeah, no, I think you could probably lean into the fact that boss, the topic was important. I'm glad we had a meeting about whatever the topic was. It would be great if we had time to have more conversation around it. Perhaps that might be a way of approaching it. Yeah, it's a challenging one, that's for sure. Just looking at the time though, Jenny, we're getting pretty close to the end here.
No,
believe it or not. But I think the last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up was just this whole concept about being able to do what you love at work, right? Focus on your strengths. Marcus Buckingham has built an entire brand around this.
Yep.
But what does it really mean? Right? It doesn't, and it's obviously a leading question, because it doesn't mean you get to do what you love every minute of every hour of every day of every week that you're at work. But what does it really mean?
So this is so powerful, really, if leaders and their teams can lean into this. The first number that you need to hear, the first statistic, is when we say, do what you love. And this was surprising to me. Only 20% of your time needs to be on what you love doing. And for someone who loves 95% of the work they're doing, I'm like, oh, that would be awful. However, engagement satisfaction rises if we've got at least 20% of our week. So that takes the pressure off a little bit, I think, in some areas. The idea of what do you love to do. So we have got caught in a little bit of a legacy of spot the weakness, get people better at what they don't do well, and we'll pick on those areas. And what we do when we work in our weaknesses, or we focus only on our weaknesses, is we suck the life out of people. There is a reason that they're not very good at it. They don't have the building blocks. They don't have that strength set to do that well. And so when we get to focus on what we love, we're building from a strength-based set. And that literally is like lighting a fire underneath somebody. You can see them ignite. So by asking the question to your team, we're full of questions. Please don't ask them all in one meeting. That's exhausting. But what is it that you love to do? What do you love about your job? And then listen really carefully. And in listening, you're not just listening to the words, watch their body language, watch their eyes light up when they tell you the part of their job that they love. And as a leader, the next part within that is how much of that are they getting to do? And then the other question that he includes is, what do you loathe at work? And these are really strong words, but they're strong for a reason, because there's that emotional connection to it. And when we're emotionally connected, we drive better. Our engagement goes up, our satisfaction goes up. So what do you loathe? That's good information for you as a leader, because if you keep giving Jenny work that she loathes, you're inhibiting her performance. If you keep giving or are able to give Jenny work that she loves, you're driving that. That's going to lift up. Now, we live in boxes of job descriptions, or we used to live in boxes of job descriptions. Unfortunately, that's changing, because if I love doing something and you loathe it, can we just switch those tasks if we're on a team? In so many cases we can, but we forget to look at it that way because that's not on your piece of paper. Okay, well, maybe we could switch that. And there's always going to be tasks that people don't want to do. Well, then share them out and just make sure the same person isn't getting all the stuff that they loathe all of the time. There's so many different avenues that you can take those two questions down, but to keep coming back to what do you love to do? And I think, sorry, on a ramble, but the other really important thing to do is, if you see something that I'm really good at, okay, I produce for you in that area, your assumption will be I love it. And that isn't always the case. It might be good at it. Doesn't mean I have to stop it, but that's why the question is really important, because it might actually be quite hard work for me to do it. Well, I'll keep doing it, but we want to add something that I love in there too. That's different.
No, very good. So much good in there. We always wrap up, folks, with one big idea, a couple strategies.
We do.
Generally 3 questions. Sometimes Jenny sneaks in a couple others. But we've hit that point where it is time to wrap up.
Okay, and because of our journey here, we usually use a slide for these two, but we now talk to it so that when you do listen to this in podcast, you don't need to see the slides, although they're always in the show notes as well. So our big idea, this Gordian knot, it's a myth, a story from Alexander the Great. We get really wrapped up in the way it's always been. We get ourselves tied in knots. And I think it was James Clear who said, it's hard to grow beyond something if you won't let go of it. And so what's your Gordian knot? What are you doing because you've always done it? And control is a big one in those. We talked about that earlier. So what can you do to set yourself free? Remember, if you are a leader here, this is about getting you back to what you love to do as well. Work doesn't have to be hard work all the time. So we're looking for those tiny tweaks that just have the biggest changes to set your people free, but also to set you free, bring yourself some more time back. So I just have one slide today because I caught this quote as I was moving through, and I'm like, this captures it. The simplest tiny tweaks to really propel your team, to help your team to move forward. So in order to welcome people, when you're hosting a meeting, we talked about that. Remember that connection or that check-in at the beginning, but always welcome people. Always use their name. Always talk about the value that they bring. That lifts people really, really quickly. If you want to see people recognize the progress that they've made. Recognize the unseen work. There was a study done that when progress was recognized, people reported having a great day as opposed to just having a day. It's simple progress. That means something. We feel that moving forwards. I mentioned it earlier too, maybe in this scene, what can you pre-approve? Okay, I see that you've got this. Go for it. Just keep me in touch. Keep me, in the know of what I need to be accountable to. We often talk about hearing people and we don't do it very well. So how often can you actually stop talking? Stop giving your advice. Listen to the adults around you. What are they seeing? What are they thinking? Which way do they believe would be a good way to go? That's a great conversation. And it's not all on you. It's less exhausting for leaders too. You'd be amazed what you learn if you could lean into that a little bit. If we're valuing people, we didn't talk about this today, but power thank yous. We've done them numerous times before. They come from Mark Goulston. There's 3 parts to a power thank you. What are you thanking them for? What did it take from them? This is not about you. What did it take from them? And what was the impact that that had, either for you as the leader or the team or the organization? And then there's that word. People get a little bit, I don't want to love people at work. Well, let people express the very best in themselves. And when we hold people to who they are, you'll be amazed what happens. And that last little bit we were talking about, loving and loathing, that all builds into there too. So only 1 slide today, but at least 5 different things. You can take them away. You can do them today. You could start on Monday. Although I'd encourage you, half of this we can do in our not work life as well. And then, Craig, you nailed me. 4 questions today. So 3+ now appears in the slide. So these questions are just for you to contemplate. I promise we'll have 3 next week. Okay, now promised. What is stopping you from doing the best work of your life? There's that question that we talked about. What stories are you telling yourself? Be careful. We create stories all the time. And that holds us back. That holds our team back. Let's deal with what's sort of the reality and build on that reality. Who needs some more of your attention? And you can tie that into the 4th question there. I just talked about a power thank you. Who's going to receive your power thank you today? That would be a great way to finish your week off. Text them, Teams them, email them, pick up the phone, maybe go see them if you're working face to face. There you go.
Excellent. Fortunately for me, this is one of the things I love doing, Jenny. So really appreciate these Friday morning conversations, and we'll be back December 1st, December 1st, to chat about continuous improvement. It's a concept that's been playing on my mind lately, and I selfishly asked Jenny if we could try and work this one into the schedule. So I am looking forward to learning as much as everybody else does on these conversations. So have yourselves a great weekend. Jenny, as always, thank you. I appreciate you. And have a great weekend.
Fantastic. Thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody.